Welcome to the I Love New Mexico podcast. As you know, this is a podcast where we talk about anything and everything that has to do in New Mexico. And we have been waiting a while to get Alan Ross on the podcast because he's a very busy guy, but also because Alan has a history of working with one of perhaps my favorite photographer and somebody who is an icon in terms of creating I don't know a better way to say it, true New Mexico images, and that's inadequate language. But our guest today is Alan Ross, who is an accomplished photographer and who worked as Ansel Adams' assistant. And before I say more and bungle half of the details, Alan, I'd love for you to introduce yourself in your own language to our guests.
Well, thank you, Bunny. I love New Mexico too. My wife and I have been living here for just over 30 years now, and I actually owe a lot of that to Ansel Adams. Uh, I was Ansel Adams' photographic assistant full time from 1974 to 1979. But in 1975, Ansel had a series of photographs of Yosemite called his special edition prints that he'd been offering for sale at the Ansel Adams Gallery in Yosemite for a number of years. And in 1975, he turned the pleasure of making those prints over to me. And I'm still making them almost 50 years later. I'm still
Wow.
making the prints from Ansel's original negatives of Yosemite. And so Ansel and I was in regular contact with Ansel for 5 years after I left to open my own advertising studio in San Francisco. But I was commuting down to Carmel to print in Ansel's house. And in fact, I was in his darkroom printing just shortly before he died. He was in the hospital already, and I sent some prints over to the hospital for him to approve. uh,
Wow.
so anyway, my association with Ansel has been considerable, yeah, over the years. And as a matter of fact, it was my association with Ansel that wound up pretty much having me fall in love with the Southwest and move to Santa Fe. When I started working for Ansel, I was very much of a mountain enthusiast. I had friends in Colorado, and I loved the Sierras and so on. But Ansel's house was so full of Native American and Southwest art and so on that I started migrating to the South and started really enjoying the Four Corners area and getting down into New Mexico and so on. So um, it was Ansel that really caused my interest into where I am now. Back in 1992, my wife and I were here with our 2-year-old daughter. I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area in a little town called Sausalito, another popular place. Um, but we were here in Santa Fe on a vacation, and my wife was looking at the paper and said, "Ooh, look what kind of a house you can get for so much. Gee, wouldn't it be interesting to move here and stuff?" And then things got a little rough. There was a little mini recession at the time, and we thought, well, why not? So here we are. So we came here and built a house south of Santa Fe. And actually, right now where I'm sitting, if I look out the window, I'm looking right up at the Sangres and looking north. And so I have a couple of acres of open space around me, and it's very nice.
I am so interested. We can talk for a long time about what's happened in the past, but I see photos on the wall behind you, and I want to know what you're doing. What is Alan Ross creating now?
Well, I'm still photographing. I'm doing been doing a lot of traveling. I can't really call them workshops, but they're photo adventures. We just did one to Scotland a couple of weeks ago. Got back from that, and I have a couple of fellows from the UK coming to study darkroom work with me, printing with me. We'll start tomorrow. And then in 3 weeks, we'll be in Greece doing another photo adventure.
Well,
And,
when you talk about photo adventure, how does, I mean, does somebody have to be an accomplished photographer to go along with you? How does that work? I'm curious.
well, actually, it's open to anybody that's interested in making images of an area, and it started out with being essentially a kind of photographic workshop where I would talk about the how cameras work and how film works or digital and so on. But in the last couple of sessions, we've had a couple of people that just wanted to tag along as an artist, and they were doing sketching and things like that. And so, I'm still here to help people make photographs. They're still with the group to help people make photographs. But the whole idea is to go places where we want to photograph or make art. It's not like everybody off the bus, you got 15 minutes and back on to go someplace else. We have people working in large format cameras where you have to have a tripod and you put the dark cloth over your head to make 4x5 or 8x10 inch negatives. And that takes a little while to do that, but we're not in any kind of a rush to move. So we've had some wonderful guides, and I've done a couple of workshops here in Santa Fe too, where we'll go up to Pouillet Cliff Dwellings or up to Taos and so on. Tent Rocks, although that's closed now, but there's a lot of wonderful stuff to photograph here. Um,
And
would-
and well, no, no, no. Go ahead, because when you said Scotland, and then you had these guys coming from the UK, I'm just curious about how. I mean, are the people who go with you from all over the country? Are
I've
they?
had people from all over the world. Actually, we've got a friend that lives in Bethlehem, and I've made numerous, I think 10 trips to China connected with photography.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a fellow in Hangzhou, China, that loves the Ansel zone system and large format photography, and a lot of Chinese do love that. And so I've been over there a number of times, although it doesn't look with the current political and other situations that's going to be happening again. But no, I've people from South America, people from Europe. I've done little sessions in Germany and Italy, and yeah, it's fun. I love traveling.
Well, and what about, have you? So you have these guys coming from the UK to do darkroom work, but have you ever done an adventure in New Mexico?
Yeah, we've done a couple of them. Well, let's see, back in the, I've, 10, 15 years ago, maybe longer. I have to get my calendar out to look, but we did. I sponsored what I called road trips, and we'd start out here in Santa Fe and then drive up into Colorado and photograph up in there, and maybe over into Utah and do a little work there, and then work our way back through Chaco Canyon and wind up back here. And so I did a couple of those, and then in the last couple of years, we've had some, like I mentioned, some workshops here where we'll do Taos and Pouillet and Bandelier and just some other places to photograph around. There's lots to see and do.
There is. Now I have to know how that relationship with Ansel Adams began. I mean, was it just was it, did you have to interview with 100 other people, or did he find you? I'm curious about how that came about.
Well, it's one of those ironies that it's sometimes it's people and being in the right place at the right time. I started my education as a mechanical engineering student at University of California, Davis, but that was too rigorous. I mean, it was too fussy. And so I transferred. This is in the early mid 60s, and environmental studies didn't exist, so I transferred down to Berkeley into the School of Forestry, where they described the forest in terms of board feet. That didn't suit me very well. Instead of taking care of the nice little,
Wow.
yes, it was the lumber industry. And Berkeley had a design department that was kind of patterned after a Nouveau Bauhaus. It had city and regional planning, it had architecture, it had glass blowing, it had silversmithing, it had interior and graphic design. And I transferred into that. They had a photography class that could be repeated for credit. Um, and so I did that. And shortly after I changed majors into design, we got a new department chairman in the name of William Garnett, who had 3 Guggenheim grants for his aerial photography. And he was, a fantastic person, and he became my first mentor. And he introduced our class to an advertising studio in San Francisco, and an amazing, amazing photographer. And I saw my first 8x10 color transparency there, and it just like blew me away. Um, at any rate, I really stuck with the photography at that point, and I was just finishing college with an independent major in photography that I worked out for myself. Um, and I was at a camera store in San Francisco one day. I didn't need anything, but for some reason or other, I went to the camera store, and I walked in the door and overheard a clerk telling somebody that there was this studio photographer in San Francisco looking for an assistant. Well, I'd been to his studio a couple of times with the class, and I stopped my tracks, drove down there, and chatted for a while, and showed him some photographs. And he said, "Okay, well, the the floor needs mopping, the cameras need putting away. I'm going out for a bit. See you later." And I became his assistant, and he and Ansel Adams were friends. And my that job I lasted for 3 years, and then he retired. His photographer Milton Halberstadt retired, and I wrote Ansel. I'd met him, and would you need an assistant? And he said no, but we'd love to have you help out with the workshops we're doing in Yosemite. So I assisted his workshop there in 1973, and then assisted a couple of other workshops for the gallery that Ansel wasn't part of. But I was running the darkroom for a workshop in July of 1974, and he asked me if I'd be interested in moving to Carmel and working for him full time. So I thought about that for a microsecond and
Right.
started packing my bags. It was very good. Ansel had no concept of a day off. He had a wonderful guy, Ted Orland, working for him Monday through Friday, and I was hired to work Friday through Monday.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then
That I
Ted went
didn't
on
know that.
a few months later, and I was it. So that was great.
Was so was he always um who he was? I mean, I guess
He
that's
was
a
one of the he was one of the warmest, most social people I've ever met. He loved nothing more than a good corny joke. He loved having people around. He was completely good natured. He always kept himself listed in the phone book, phone number and address, and anybody could
what?
call him. And he was very open, and he loved sharing his love for photography. So, I've been teaching photography since 1973, and it's part of my life.
That is so cool. I have written a blog about and heard a lot of stories about, Moonrise over Hernandez, which is without a
Sure.
doubt one of my favorite images. And somebody said to me a couple of years ago, "Oh, that's so I can't, it was almost so staged and so passe." And I said, to me, I don't think so. I think it's really indicative of what you can find here, how you can just go around a corner and, as I understand the story, see something you have to capture because it's so surprising and so beautiful. I don't know
Right.
what you think about that.
Well, actually, I do have some thoughts on Moonrise, and one is that Ansel made his first trip to Santa Fe and Taos in 1927, and then came back, 3 times later. I'm not very good at dates, but 27, 28, and 29, 30, and so on. And the one interesting thing is that with all the research I've done, all of Ansel's early photographs in New Mexico were cultural. The first, I think the first landscape he made in New Mexico was like 1933. Otherwise,
Oh,
he was photographing people and adobe buildings and Indian dances and stuff like that. And I mean, he did a book, Taos Pueblo, that was published, I think, in 1933 or earlier, 30 maybe, and so but they were all pictures of people and where they lived and what they were doing. You know, Maria Martinez making pottery, and Ansel's wife, Virginia, Ansel and his Virginia, had a complete dinner set of Maria pottery.
Wow. Shut the light. I'm sorry. That's huge.
Right, and they decided to have. Oh, George O'Keeffe came out to stay at the house one time for a
Oh
week.
my.
Uh, Mrs. Adams decided to serve a New Mexican dinner on the Maria pottery, and that was the evening that O'Keeffe decided not to come up for dinner.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I made a photograph of Ansel and O'Keeffe that's actually in the O'Keeffe Museum now. But at any rate, Ansel's love for New Mexico was deep, and Moonrise Hernandez was not the surprise that it's made out to be because
Okay.
he, well, I mean, he'd photographed the church at Hernandez before, more from the back
Mhm.
road, but he and friends were up photographing up in the Chama River Valley that day. And when you come down from Abiquiu, you come around a corner, and the whole sangres are laid out there. You can see the whole.
Right?
So and that's like 13 miles north of Hernandez. So that Ansel came around the corner, and here's this moon and these clouds. And I spent a lot of time in the car with Ansel driving around looking for photographs. And I swear for the next 13 miles, he's driving down the road thinking, there's got to be something I can do with that moon and clouds. There's got to be something I can do with the moon and clouds. Oh, there's that cemetery in Hernandez. I wonder. And so he'd come around the corner into Hernandez, and bang, there it is. But
Hmm.
quite the surprise that it's made out to be. Yes, he did.
Okay.
Yes, he did come around the corner and see that scene and screech us to a halt. But the whole moon and clouds and everything like that was no surprise. And so
Well,
one of his favorite lines was "Chance favors the prepared mind," and Ansel, yeah, isn't that a nice one?
I'm
Uh,
writing it down right now. Chance favors the
the
prepared
prepared
mind.
mind. And I mean, Ansel was a working professional photographer for one thing, and when somebody's paying you to make a photograph, you don't want to blow it. And
Right.
another thing, Ansel's sort of made out to be a techno fanatic, but he was a musician. He started out as a fantastic musician, and for Ansel, testing film and doing stuff like that was no different than playing scales. He just didn't want to hit a wrong note. And and I have a recording that my boss before Ansel made of Ansel in 1958 at the piano, and he was awfully good. In later years, he had horrible arthritis in his fingers, and it hurt to play the piano. But after a couple of glasses of wine, you could loosen up and pull a nice sound out of the thing.
That's right. That's right. Alan, talk. So I love these Ansel Adams stories, but tell some of yours. I want to hear about your New Mexico experiences. I want to know what you have done that you've loved, and what you've done that's been a little bit of a surprise, even if the Hernandez photo was not the same surprise I expected it to be. Yeah.
I've had some wonderful experiences here in New Mexico, and I wrote a blog a number of years ago about called "Too Close to Home." I mentioned I grew up in Sausalito, California, which is the first town on the north end of the Golden Gate Bridge. And the last thing I would have ever thought of doing is photographing the Golden Gate Bridge. It was too familiar and all of this stuff. Well, when I had my advertising studio, I got hired to photograph the Golden Gate Bridge for the Bank of America, and I made a couple of my very best photographs because I had to photograph. But when I moved down to Carmel to work for Ansel, I was going to Point Lobos for lunch every day. I'm driving down to Big Sur all the time and so on. But the longer I was there, the less I did. Became too familiar. And that's kind of happened to me a bit here in New Mexico, in the Santa Fe area, is I don't see the things as new the way I used to. But I mean, one of the first things that just I really, really fell in love with, and I'm still in love with it, is El Rancho de las Golondrinas. which is a
Oh,
time,
right.
and I've made some wonderful photographs there. And I've been made photographs at Las Trampas and other places on the high road to Taos, and yeah, just I mean, I love the place, and so. But a lot of the time, even when in my earlier days and with Ansel and so on, most of my photographs were made when I was on vacation or traveling. Once again, it's getting away from my familiar surroundings.
Mhm.
But that's one of the nice things about doing the little workshops here, the photo adventures here, is that I'm out looking along with other people, looking at the architecture, looking at the scenery and so on. And so it's kind of nice. It's a little kick in the pants.
So I live with a guy. I'm married to a guy who grew up in Santa Fe. Started in Cimarron, but then ended up here when he was 9 years old. And he still says almost every day, not in an ironic way at all. He just still says every day in the afternoon and the evening, look at the light. It's
Yeah.
so, can you believe the light on, whether we're walking around downtown and it's the light on the side of the New Mexico Museum, New Mexico History Museum, or at the end of the street, or if we're out here at the house, we live south of town off of Rabbit Road. And I wonder if you have the same feeling about the light here. I
Oh,
know
I
it
do.
feels like it's overdone. We talk about it too much, but for somebody who's listening, who's in Scotland today or
Right.
in Dubai or Africa, it's really,
Yeah.
I think it's important for them to get what the light is like here.
Oh, and it's beautiful. I mean, I woke up this morning and the skies were beautiful. I mean, we've had kind of smoky days the last couple of days, and but the light this morning was just lovely. And I like I say, my window here looks right up at the sun rays, and so I can see all of this, and it's lovely. And yeah, no, I notice it all the time. And actually, when we moved here, our daughter was 3 years old, and she wound up. She used to do little PowerPoint things as to why we should move someplace else where there's more for kids to do or something. Uh, and so she went to university at USC in Los Angeles, and the first Christmas she came home. Oh my God, the air is so clear here. You can breathe, and it snowed. Oh, it's so gorgeous. It was like it took her a little bit of visitation in LA to. Oh yeah, there is something really magical here.
There is something really magical here. Well, tell me how. I know that you said you're going to go to Greece
Yeah,
soon. If we had a listener who was curious about your adventures and wanted to be part of that, because I get the impression that you would be one of the best um, teachers and guides and leaders in terms of how to capture images, but how can they find you and get to know more?
we have all of that on my website. It's alanrossphotography.com.
And
Um,
we have a link to that in the show notes, so I want folks to know
okay.
that they can find that
Yeah,
there.
we have there's a page of workshops, and just click on that, and it talks about the adventures and little photo Zoom talks I do once a month, just to sit around and talk about photography with people that are interested in it. And
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me about that. How does that work?
well, during the pandemic and stuff, we couldn't do the regular workshops the way we used to, and stuff. And honest truth is, most of our closest friends have been workshop students at one point or another, or associates. And we just decided to do what we call Zoom ins, and just, where we just sign up and have chit chats about photography. And they can share work, and we can talk about things, and people have questions of how do you do this or how do you do that, and it's fun. So we do that. Um, but I spend I most of my time, aside from still printing the Ansel Adams special edition prints, and I'm teaching, and those are my main things. I'm still photographing myself, but not as much as I used to. And when I go out with the workshops, I don't. My figure my time is more to spend time with the participants than it is for me to get my camera out and do things. So I'm not doing. Actually, my wife and I are just talking about having some vacation time where I just bring my camera and I can stop wherever I want and do things.
You can
Um,
go around a corner and catch an image, but and what after Greece? Is there anything else on the horizon in terms of what people could get involved
yeah,
with?
my heritage is Scottish, so that's partly why
Mine too.
I've
Yes.
my core clan is MacLeod's, which is Isle of Skye, and anyway, so that's been a lot of the reason for Scotland. But I love to travel. We did a workshop in Tuscany a number of years ago. We've done Croatia, which is a fabulous place. Done a little one in Germany for a company there. We have plans to do a Romania workshop. We think maybe in June next year, and we're thinking of another Scottish Isles workshop in maybe. Well, we're thinking either late June or September. We haven't quite decided yet. It's still a little up in the air, but those things will be on the website.
Okay, so it's alanrossphotography.com.
Yeah.
Okay. And I thank you, Alan, for taking a moment to visit because you've been on our list for a long time, and it's just a huge privilege to talk to you and hear your stories.
Well, it's been a pleasure here too, because I do love Santa Fe.
Nice. And we both love New Mexico, so this is
Yes,
a
indeed.
perfect way to have a conversation. Thank
Yep,
you so much.
it's a pleasure.